Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's start. My name is Jackson, and here is how my marriage died slowly over the course of 7 years, how I finally stopped fighting for something that was never going to happen, and how my decision to focus on myself ended up revealing truths about my relationship that I've been avoiding for far too long. There are other men out there living in dead bedrooms, being told they're asking for too much, wondering if they're crazy for wanting things they deserve. If that's you, maybe my story will help you see your situation more clearly. Let me start from the beginning so you understand how we got here. I met Lauren 13 years ago when we were both in our late 20s. We met through mutual friends at a weekend event, and I was immediately drawn to her after our introduction. She was pretty, and we clicked right away when we started talking. We exchanged numbers that day, and I called her a few days later to ask her out. On our first date, we talked for hours that night, way past when we'd finished our meals. There was this easy flow to the conversation. We started dating seriously after that first date. We'd see each other 2 or 3 times a week, doing all the normal things couples do as they get to know each other. We got married after 3 years of dating in a small ceremony with about 80 guests, mostly family and close friends. I remember feeling so optimistic about our future during that trip. I'd look at Lauren and think about all the years ahead of us, all the experiences we'd share, the home we'd build together, the family we'd raise. I was all in, completely committed to making this marriage work and building a life with this woman. Those first few years of marriage were genuinely good. I felt happy and satisfied with my relationship. We had a healthy, intimate life 2 or 3 times a week on average. Some weeks it might be more, some weeks less, but it was consistent. There was desire there, a sense that we both wanted each other and enjoyed being close. Lauren would sometimes initiate, but I initiated most of the time, and we were both responsive to each other. There's mutual desire, mutual effort. A sense that both people value that aspect of the relationship and want to maintain it. Our life together felt like a genuine partnership during those early years. We both worked full-time jobs, contributed to household finances, took care of the home, and shared responsibilities. From the outside, we looked like the perfect young married couple with our whole lives ahead of us. We had a strong foundation and a bright future. I felt like I'd found my person. The woman I was going to spend the rest of my life with, the woman who would be the mother of my children. That last part was essential to me, and I want to make sure you understand just how important it was, because it becomes central to everything that happened later. I'd always wanted to be a father. It was a core part of how I envisioned my life and my future. When I think about what I wanted my life to look like in 10 or 20 years, I always pictured having kids. My dad had been a great father, really present and involved in my life, and I wanted to pass that on to the next generation. I wanted to experience that bond between parent and child. Wanted to raise good humans who would go out into the world and make it better. This wasn't just a casual preference. It was a deep desire that had been part of who I was for as long as I could remember. When we got married, I assumed we'd start trying for kids within a few years. We were both in our early 30s, a good age to have children. We were financially stable, we lived in a good neighborhood, and we had a strong relationship. All the pieces were in place. I figured we'd enjoy being married for a couple of years, just the 2 of us, and then we'd start trying to build our family. That was the plan in my head. And for those first 3 years of marriage, I was content to wait because we were still enjoying the newlywed phase of our relationship. But I always knew that the conversation about having children was coming, and I was looking forward to it. When I brought up the subject 3 years into our marriage, I thought it would be a straightforward conversation because I believed we'd both be on the same page, ready to move forward with something we'd already agreed we both wanted. I remember that evening so clearly because it went so differently from what I expected. It was a weeknight. We were just relaxing after a long day at work. It felt like a good moment to bring up something important, so I went for it. I just turned to her and said, I think we should start trying for a baby. I'm ready to be a dad, and we're in a good place for it right now. I said it with a smile because I was genuinely excited about the idea. I expected her to get excited, too. But that's not what happened. Instead, Lauren's whole face took on an uncomfortable expression. Her smile disappeared, and then she responded, saying she wasn't sure she was ready yet. She said she wanted to focus on her career for a while longer because she'd just gotten promoted at work a few months earlier. She explained that she was finally moving up in her company, finally getting the recognition and opportunities she'd been working toward. And she didn't want to take maternity leave right when things were going so well professionally. She said that if she got pregnant now, she'd have to step back from work right when she should be proving herself in her new role, and it might hurt her chances for future advancement. I sat there listening to her, and I have to admit, I was disappointed. This wasn't the response I'd been hoping for. But at the same time, I tried to understand where she was coming from. Her career is essential. I get that. I cared about my own career, too, and I knew Lauren had worked hard to get where she was. I didn't want to be the kind of husband who dismissed his wife's professional goals or pressured her into giving up opportunities she'd earned. So even though I was disappointed, I told her I understood. I said we could wait a little longer. She told me we should revisit the conversation in a year or two, that by then she'd be more established in her new position, and it would be a better time. I agreed, thinking that was reasonable. A year or two didn't seem like that long to wait, and if it meant Lauren would feel more comfortable and ready, then it was worth it. But here's where things started to go wrong, and it happened so fast that I almost didn't notice it at first. Within just a few weeks of that conversation about having kids, Lauren started turning me down when I tried to be intimate with her. At first, it was just once in a while. I'd initiate, and she'd say something like, "I'm exhausted tonight, can we do it this weekend instead?" Or, "I have that big meeting first thing tomorrow morning, I need to get a good night's sleep." And that's normal. Everyone has nights when they're genuinely tired, stressed, or not in the mood. I didn't think anything of it the first few times it happened. I'd just say okay, no problem, and we'd go to sleep. I figured we'd be intimate in a day or two when she was feeling more up to it. But those occasional rejections started happening more often. What had been once in a while became once a week, then multiple times a week, then basically every single time I tried to initiate anything physical. And it was always the same kinds of excuses. "I'm too tired" was the big one, the one I heard more than any other. She'd come home from work, and even if we'd had a lovely evening together, eaten dinner, watched some TV, when it came time for bed, and I'd try to be affectionate or initiate intimacy, she'd say she was too tired. Or it would be, "I have a headache," or "my stomach doesn't feel great," or "I'm really stressed about this project at work," or "I'm just not feeling it tonight, can we just cuddle instead?" There was always a reason, always an excuse for why we couldn't be intimate right then. And she'd always add something like maybe tomorrow, or maybe this weekend to soften the rejection, making it seem like it was just about that particular moment, not a bigger pattern. But the maybe tomorrow never came. Tomorrow would arrive, and there would be a new excuse. The weekend would come, and she'd be too tired from running errands or too stressed from something else. Our intimate life, which had been healthy and normal for the first 3 years of our marriage, just completely fell apart. We went from 2 or 3 times a week to maybe once a month if I was lucky. And even that one time a month wasn't easy. It's not like Lauren would initiate or show interest. I'd have to try multiple times throughout the month, get rejected over and over. And then if everything aligned perfectly and she happened to be in the right mood, it would happen. And even when it did happen, it felt completely different from how it used to be. Lauren seems to be going through the motions to keep me satisfied rather than because she actually wanted to be close to me. It took me a few months to really see the pattern clearly, but once I did, it became impossible to ignore. The timing was too obvious. The conclusion was pretty clear. She was avoiding getting pregnant. If we weren't being intimate, then there was zero chance of pregnancy happening, even accidentally. It was a way to control the situation without having to have difficult conversations about it. When I realized this, I knew I needed to talk to her about it directly. So one evening, I sat her down and told her what I'd been noticing. I said that our intimate life had completely changed since I brought up having kids, and I didn't think that was a coincidence. I told her that if she wasn't ready to get pregnant yet, I completely understood and respected that, but we didn't have to stop being intimate altogether. We could use protection. We could use condoms, or she could go on birth control if she weren't already. There were ways to prevent pregnancy while still maintaining a healthy physical relationship. We didn't have to choose between having a good marriage and waiting to have children. Those two things didn't have to be mutually exclusive. But Lauren completely brushed off what I was saying. She acted like I was reading too much into things and making connections that weren't there. She insisted that the timing was just coincidental, that she really was just tired and stressed with work, that it had absolutely nothing to do with avoiding pregnancy or the conversation we'd had about kids. She promised me that things would get better, that she'd make more of an effort, that we'd get back to how things used to be in the beginning of our marriage. She made it sound like it was just a temporary rough patch, something that would naturally resolve itself once she was less stressed at work or once she adjusted to her new position. So I chose to believe her, or at least I tried to, because the alternative, that she was lying to me and manipulating the situation, was too painful to accept. I decided to give it time and see if things improved like she promised they would. But nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. Months went by, and our intimate life stayed the same. Practically non-existent. A whole year passed from that initial conversation about having kids, and our physical relationship was still dead. We were having sex maybe once every 2 or 3 months at that point, and it was always on Lauren's terms, always when she decided she was in the mood, never when I initiated. I felt like I was begging my own wife for physical affection, and that feeling is incredibly degrading. It chips away at your self-esteem in ways that are hard to explain unless you've experienced it yourself. The rejection started affecting how I felt about myself in general, not just in my marriage. I start wondering if there's something wrong with me. I look at myself in the mirror and pick apart every single thing I see. It's a terrible headspace to be in, and it affects everything. And through all of this, the years kept passing. Years of promises from Lauren that things would get better, that she'd make more effort, that our relationship would go back to how it used to be. But those promises were empty. Nothing ever actually changed. When I turned 36 and Lauren was 34, I brought it up again. I told her we should really start trying because we weren't getting any younger. And I knew that age becomes a factor in fertility and pregnancy complications. She told me she wanted to wait until she hit a particular milestone at work, some specific promotion or project completion that she was working toward. She made it sound like it would just be a few more months, that once she achieved this particular goal, then we could start trying. So I waited, thinking that milestone would come and we'd finally move forward. But when that milestone came and went, there was a new reason to wait. I pointed out that fertility starts declining for women after 35, that the risks for complications during pregnancy increase with age, and that we really shouldn't wait much longer if we want to have children. I'd done research, read articles, and talked to friends who did kids. I knew the statistics. I knew that every year we waited made it harder and riskier. But Lauren had another excuse ready. This time it was about money. She said she wanted to wait until we'd saved more, until we'd paid off more of the mortgage, until we were more financially secure. She made it sound responsible and practical, as if she were just being smart about making sure we could afford to raise children properly. But here's the thing, we were already financially secure. We both had good jobs with steady incomes. We had savings. We had equity in our house. We weren't rich, but we were more comfortable than many people with children. The financial excuse didn't really hold up under scrutiny, but I didn't push back as hard as I should have. I just accepted it and waited some more, hoping that eventually we'd reach whatever invisible threshold Lauren had in her mind for being ready. I felt like I was begging for affection and intimacy from my own wife, and that feeling is incredibly degrading and painful in ways that are hard to put into words. It made me feel pathetic. I tried everything I could think of to fix the situation, to figure out what was wrong and make it better. I planned romantic dates, thinking maybe we just needed to reconnect emotionally. Maybe we'd lost that spark and needed to rediscover it. I'd make reservations at nice restaurants, plan evenings out doing things we used to enjoy together, and try to create opportunities for us to feel close again. But it didn't help. The dates would be pleasant enough, we'd have decent conversations. But when we got home, nothing changed. I'd still get rejected if I tried to be intimate. I'd ask whether she was still attracted to me, whether something about me had changed that turned her off, and whether there was something I was doing wrong in bed. I'd ask whether there were problems in our relationship that we needed to work through, whether she was unhappy about something, and whether that was why she didn't want to be intimate. But she'd always give me vague reassurances. She'd promise to make more effort and prioritize our intimate life. But nothing ever actually changed. By the time we'd been married for 7 years, I hit what I can only describe as a breaking point. I woke up one morning and realized I was emotionally exhausted from years of trying to make something work that clearly wasn't. I couldn't keep having my self-esteem chipped away bit by bit every single time Lauren pushed me away or rejected my advances. And after years of that, I just didn't have anything left to give. So I made a decision that changed the entire dynamic of our marriage. I stopped initiating any kind of physical intimacy with Lauren. No more reaching for her hand when we were sitting together. No more suggesting we go to bed at the same time. No more attempting to be romantic or affectionate. I just stopped all of it. I also stopped bringing up the subject of having children because I was tired of the excuses and the false promises. I stopped trying to plan romantic dates or do extraordinary things to win her affection. I stopped buying her flowers, surprising her with her favorite takeout, or suggesting we go away for the weekend. I stopped putting effort into maintaining our relationship because I'd been the only one for years and I was exhausted from it. And here's the part that confirmed everything I'd been feeling but hadn't wanted to admit to myself. Lauren didn't even notice that I'd stopped trying. I'm not exaggerating when I say she didn't notice. Weeks went by, then a month, then 2 months, and she never once asked me why I'd stopped initiating intimacy. She never questioned why I wasn't trying to kiss her or hold her hand anymore. She never brought up the fact that we hadn't been intimate in months, that we weren't having sex at all, that our physical relationship had completely died. She never initiated intimacy herself, never made any move to be affectionate or close to me. She seemed perfectly content, maybe even relieved, that I'd stopped trying. We were living like roommates who happened to share a house and split the bills. But we had no physical connection and barely any emotional connection beyond surface-level conversations about mundane things that hurt more than all the years of rejection combined. And I mean that sincerely. Her total indifference to the death of our intimate life confirmed what I'd been afraid of all along. She genuinely didn't care about that aspect of our marriage. She was delighted with the way things were, us living separate lives under the same roof, with our marriage being nothing more than a legal arrangement and a shared living situation. Once I stopped trying to fix our marriage or maintain any kind of connection with Lauren, things deteriorated rapidly. I started staying late at work, and I want to be clear that this wasn't because I had to or because my job required it. I was staying late because I didn't want to come home. Home didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It didn't feel like a place where I could relax, be myself, and feel comfortable. Instead, it felt like a place where I was constantly confronted with the reality that my marriage was dead and my dreams of having a family were never going to come true. I'd volunteer for extra project at work, tell my boss I'd be happy to stay late to finish something that honestly could have waited until the next day. I also started leaving for work earlier in the morning, getting up while it was still dark outside and getting out of the house before Lauren was even awake. That way, I didn't have to sit across from her at the breakfast table and pretend everything was fine. I'd grab breakfast on my way to work, sit in my car in the parking lot for a while if I was too early, anything to avoid being in that house with her. I also reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years of marriage. When you're in a relationship, especially a marriage, it's easy to let friendships slide as you focus on your partner and building a life together. But once I stopped caring about my marriage, I realized I needed other people in my life, needed social connections outside of my relationship with Lauren. So I reached out to guys I'd been friends with, guys I hadn't talked to in years. I started hanging out with them more, going out after work for drinks or dinner, meeting up on weekends to watch sports or play golf, or just hanging out. I made plans to be out of the house as much as possible. I'd come home late at night, often after 10 or 11 o'clock, and Lauren would already be in bed asleep. That was perfect for me because it meant I could avoid any interaction with her, just brush my teeth and get into bed without having to talk or acknowledge the massive elephant in the room, our failing marriage. During those months of avoiding my wife and spending most of my time either at work or out with friends, something else started happening that I didn't really notice at first. I stopped taking care of myself. I'd always been relatively health conscious in my 20s, but as my marriage deteriorated and I became unhappier, I let all of that slide. I was eating out constantly because I was never home for meals. I'd grab fast food for lunch, whatever was quick and convenient from the drive-thru near my office. I stopped working out completely. The gym membership I'd had for years went unused. I was unhappy and stressed, and I was using food as a comfort mechanism without really thinking about it or being conscious of what I was doing to my body. The weight crept on gradually, the way it always does when you're not paying attention to what you're eating or how much you're moving. 5 pounds became 10, and I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that I'd lose it eventually. 10 pounds became 20, and my pants started feeling a little tighter around the waist, but I just loosened my belt a notch and didn't think much of it. 20 pounds became 30, and suddenly my clothes weren't fitting right anymore. My pants were tight and uncomfortable, digging into my waist when I sat down. My shirts were pulling across my stomach and chest, the buttons straining. But I didn't get back in shape. I kept gaining weight. By the time I looked at myself and acknowledged what was happening, I'd put on 35 or 40 pounds, most of it concentrated around my midsection. My face was rounder and fuller, my cheeks puffy. My jawline disappeared completely, buried under a layer of fat. I looked tired and unhealthy and defeated. One day, I was getting ready for work, standing in front of the bathroom mirror in just my underwear, and I really looked at myself for the first time in months. I barely recognized the person staring back at me. This wasn't who I was, or at least it wasn't who I'd always thought I was. I'd become this overweight, out of shape, unhappy version of myself, and I'd let it happen without really fighting it. I felt terrible physically. I was sluggish and tired all the time, even though I was sleeping plenty. I'd get winded going up a flight of stairs. My back hurt from carrying the extra weight. My knees ached. But I also felt terrible mentally and emotionally, and that was even worse than the physical discomfort. I'd let myself go physically to the point where I didn't even recognize myself. My marriage was a failure. My dream of having a family failed. My physical health was a failure. I was failing at everything that mattered to me, and I didn't know how to fix any of it. That moment of standing in front of the mirror and not recognizing myself was a wake-up call. It was like something clicked in my brain, and I realized that I'd let my unhappy marriage destroy not just my self-esteem, but my physical health and my entire sense of who I was as a person. I'd been so focused on trying to fix my relationship with Lauren for years, trying to make her want me, trying to convince her to have children with me, trying to save our marriage. But through all of that, I'd completely neglected myself. I'd stopped taking care of my body. And I made a decision right then that if my marriage was dead, if my wife didn't want me, if I wasn't going to have the family I'd always dreamed of, then at the very least I was going to take control of the one thing I could actually control, which was myself. At that point, I'd utterly given up on our marriage ever being what I wanted it to be. I was doing this for me, for myself, because I deserved to feel good about myself, even if my wife didn't desire me. I deserved to be healthy and strong and to look in the mirror and like what I saw, regardless of what was happening in my marriage. I started by joining a gym near my office. There was a nice fitness center just a few blocks from where I worked, and I signed up for a membership that same week. I started going after work, which had the added benefit of giving me even more reason not to go home. I could stay at the gym for an hour or two, get a good workout in, shower there. And by the time I got home, it would be late, and Lauren would probably already be in bed. I also hired a personal trainer, who set me up with a workout program that was focused on both cardio to burn fat and strength training to build muscle. I'm not going to lie, it was brutal at first. I was so out of shape that even basic exercises left me exhausted and sore. It was humbling and frustrating, but I stuck with it, pushing myself harder than I had in years. I also completely overhauled my diet, which was just as important as the exercise, maybe even more so. I stopped eating out for every single meal. Instead, I started meal prepping on Sundays, spending a few hours cooking healthy, high-protein meals to portion out and eat throughout the week. I cut out alcohol almost entirely. I've been drinking regularly when I was going out with friends, having beers or cocktails multiple times a week, but I cut that down to maybe once a month. I completely stopped eating junk and fast food. The transformation didn't happen overnight. This wasn't some miracle where I worked out for a month and suddenly looked like a different person. It took time, consistency, and a lot of hard work. But over about a year and a half, I became a completely different person physically. The weight started coming off within the first few months. My clothes started fitting better. I'd look in the mirror and actually like what I saw for the first time in years. The irony wasn't lost on me that my marriage was falling apart at the same time I was putting myself back together. But honestly, that's what made it possible. If I'd still been trying to fix my marriage, still been focused on Lauren and trying to make her want me, I wouldn't have had the mental and emotional energy to focus on myself like this. It was only because I'd given up on the marriage that I was able to redirect all that energy into transforming myself. People started noticing and commenting on the transformation. They'd ask me for diet advice, workout tips, what gym I went to, and what my secret was. Friends I hadn't seen in a few months would be genuinely shocked when they saw me. They'd barely recognize me because of how much I'd changed. I'd meet up with a buddy for drinks, and he'd just stare at me for a minute before saying something like, "Holy shit, man, what happened to you? You look like a completely different person." The attention felt good. I'm not going to lie about that. After spending years feeling unwanted and undesirable in my own home, feeling like I was invisible to my own wife, it was validating to have people notice me and compliment me and treat me like I was attractive. It reminded me that the problem wasn't me, that I wasn't fundamentally undesirable like I'd started to believe. The problem was my marriage and my wife's lack of interest in me, not something inherently wrong with me as a person. The physical transformation had an unexpected side effect. It boosted my confidence across every area of my life. I started taking on bigger projects at work and volunteering for leadership roles I might have shied away from before. My career was thriving at the exact same time my marriage was dying, and honestly, the success at work helped cushion the pain of the failure at home. At least I was succeeding at something. At least one central area of my life was going well, even if my personal life was a complete disaster. Through all of this transformation, both physical and professional, Lauren barely seemed to notice or care, and that told me everything I needed to know about our marriage. She didn't compliment the changes in my body. She didn't initiate any physical contact or try to reconnect emotionally with me. Our marriage remained exactly as it had been for the past couple of years, dead, cold, more like roommates than spouses. About a year into my transformation, something happened that would change everything. I started noticing that a woman at my gym was paying attention to me. I'd seen her around the gym for months, but had never really talked to her beyond a quick hello or nod when we'd pass each other. She was younger than me, probably in her early 30s, so about 10 years younger. She was attractive, clearly took fitness seriously based on her physique, and she always seemed friendly and approachable. At first, our interactions were just casual and surface level. We'd be working out near each other, and we'd say hello, make small talk about how crowded the gym was, or comment on the music. Introductory gym small talk that didn't mean anything. But then I started noticing that she was positioning herself near me more often. I'd be on the treadmill, and she'd get on the one next to mine, even if there were other open treadmills further away. I'd be in the weight area doing my strength training, and she'd come work out nearby, using the machines or doing exercises close to where I was. She started asking me for advice on exercises or form, things like, "Hey, can you check my form on these squats?" or "What's a good exercise for targeting the back?" These were things she probably already knew the answers to, but it gave her a reason to talk to me. The conversation started getting longer and more personal. She'd ask about my day, how work was going, and what I did for a living. She'd tell me about her day, her job, her life. It became obvious that she was interested in me. And I'm not going to lie, the attention felt incredible. Here was this attractive, younger woman who was showing genuine interest in me, who wanted to talk to me, who asked about my life like she actually cared about the answers. My wife hadn't complimented me or shown interest in me. I was careful not to cross any lines because I was still married, but I also didn't shut down the friendship with this beautiful lady because, honestly, it felt too good to be noticed and desired. I let the friendship develop, seeing everything as harmless, that we were just gym friends, that there was nothing wrong with having a friendly conversation with someone at the gym. We started talking more outside of just our gym encounters. We exchanged phone numbers so we could coordinate workout times and know when the other person was planning to be at the gym. But once we had each other's numbers, we started texting throughout the day. We'd text about our days, work stress, weekend plans, and life in general. On the surface, it was all innocent, but there was an undertone to it, even if we weren't acting on it. There was a tension in our interactions, a sense that we were both aware of the chemistry between us, but were choosing not to acknowledge it directly or act on it. Everything came crashing down in my marriage. The night my wife discovered something that forced both of us to finally face the truth about what our relationship had become. Throughout our entire marriage, I'd never been the type of husband who hid his phone or acted secretive about it. My password was simple, a 4-digit code I'd used for years, and I'd never made any effort to hide it from Lauren. There was never any suspicion, jealousy, or need to monitor what the other person was doing. It never occurred to me that Lauren knew my password or would ever use it to invade my privacy. So one Thursday night, it had been a long day for me. I'd worked a full day at the office, gone straight to the gym after work for an intense training session with weights and cardio, and then met up with a couple of friends for dinner at this sports bar we liked. We'd hung out for a few hours, watching a game, talking about work and life, just decompressing the way guys do. By the time I got home, it was probably close to 11 at night, maybe even a little after. I was physically exhausted from the workout, mentally tired from a long day, and just ready to crash. I walked into the house, and Lauren was already in bed, or at least the bedroom light was off, so I assumed she was asleep. I went through my usual routine of brushing my teeth, changing into shorts and a t-shirt for bed, and setting my phone on the nightstand like I did every night. I plugged it in to charge, set my alarm for the next morning, and literally within minutes of my head hitting the pillow, I was out cold. I'm talking deep sleep. What I had absolutely no idea about was that Lauren wasn't actually asleep. She was lying there in the dark, waiting for me to fall asleep, and once she was sure I was out, she reached over to my nightstand, picked up my phone, and went through it. I don't know how long she'd known my password. Maybe she'd watched me type it in at some point and memorized it. I have no idea, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that she knew it, and she used it to go through my private messages while I was sleeping next to her, completely unaware of what was happening. She must have opened my text messages and seen the usual stuff. And then she would have seen the messages with my gym girl. Our text conversations were frequent, I'll admit that. We'd text throughout the day, sometimes just random stuff about how our day was going, sometimes about fitness and workout plans, sometimes just joking around and being friendly. The tone of our messages was warm and friendly. And yes, there was probably some light flirtation in there. Nothing heavy or explicit, but the kind of playful banter that happens when two people are attracted to each other and enjoy talking to each other. Neither of us had said, "I love you, I have feelings for you," or anything that would indicate we were in some kind of emotional affair. Every single conversation we'd had was something that could have happened in public, nothing I was ashamed of or trying to hide. Lauren must have spent a good amount of time going through those messages, reading conversation after conversation, seeing how often this young lady and I texted, and noticing the tone, the warmth, and the obvious fact that we enjoyed talking to each other. I can only imagine what was going through her head as she read through all of it. But whatever she was feeling, she didn't wake me up right then. She put my phone back on the nightstand, and she waited until morning to confront me about what she'd found. When I woke up the next morning, my alarm hadn't gone off yet, so it was earlier than I usually woke up, probably around 6 or 6:30. I was still groggy, in that half-asleep state. I opened my eyes, and there was Lauren, fully dressed like she'd been up for a while, standing right next to my side of the bed, and she was holding my phone in her hand. That image is burned into my memory because of how strange and unsettling it was. She wasn't in bed, wasn't getting ready for work, wasn't doing anything normal. She was just standing there, staring at me, holding my phone, and her expression was intense. It was this mixture of anger and hurt and something else I couldn't quite identify at first. Maybe betrayal, maybe fear, maybe desperation. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. I sat up in bed, confused and still not fully awake, and asked her what was going on. My first thought wasn't that she'd gone through my phone. My first thought was that something bad had happened, like an emergency or someone calling with bad news. But then she said, "Who is this lady you have been spending time with?" And in that moment, everything clicked into place. She'd gone through my phone. She'd read my messages. She knew about my gym buddy. I was still trying to process what was happening, still half asleep and confused. My brain wasn't fully functioning yet. Lauren started accusing me directly. She asked if I was having an affair and sleeping with this woman. She asked how long it had been going on. She said I'd betrayed her, that I'd broken our marriage vows, that she couldn't believe I would do this to her after 10 years of marriage. She was acting like she'd caught me in bed with another woman. I was fully awake now, as I sat there in bed, looking at my wife who was crying and accusing me of cheating, and I felt this overwhelming sense of disbelief and frustration at the absolute absurdity of the situation. This woman, who had rejected me for 7 straight years, who had said I'm too tired thousands of times when I tried to be intimate with her, who had made me feel unwanted and undesirable in my own marriage, who had refused to have children with me despite knowing how badly I wanted to be a father, was now standing in front of me acting hurt and betrayed because another woman had shown interest in me. The hypocrisy of it was staggering. The audacity of her acting like she had any right to be upset about this after years of treating me like I didn't matter was infuriating. My response to Lauren's confrontation was probably not what she expected. In that moment, with her standing there crying, accusing me, and acting like the victim, I couldn't help but laugh. She asked me what was so funny, and I told her, "What's funny is that you're standing here acting jealous and hurt because another woman is interested in me, when you spent the last 7 years making it crystal clear that you don't want me." I told her she had absolutely no right to be upset about this, that she'd lost the right to be jealous or possessive the moment she decided our marriage didn't need intimacy or physical connection. Lauren tried to interrupt, but I kept going because I had 7 years of frustration and hurt and rejection built up inside me, and it was all coming out now. I told her that for 7 years she'd rejected me over and over with excuse after excuse. I asked her directly, "Why do you even care? You've made it obvious you don't want me. So why does it matter if someone else does?" It was a genuine question because I truly didn't understand her reaction. If she didn't want me, if she was pleased with our dead bedroom and our roommate-style marriage, then why would she care if another woman was interested in me? Shouldn't she be relieved that someone else might take me off her hands, so she wouldn't have to deal with my requests for intimacy anymore? But of course, I knew the answer even as I asked the question. She cared because it wasn't about wanting me. It was about owning me, about keeping me under her control, about not wanting to lose something that belonged to her even if she didn't actually value it. Lauren was crying harder now, and she insisted that she did want me, that she loved me, that she was upset because she didn't want to lose me. She said our marriage mattered to her, that I mattered to her, and that's why she was so hurt by what she'd found on my phone. But I didn't believe a single word of it. I couldn't believe it because her actions for the past 7 years had shown me the complete opposite. I told her that if she actually wanted me, if she actually loved me the way she was claiming, then where had that love been for the past years? Where was it when I was initiating intimacy and being rejected constantly? Where was it when I was asking her to have children with me, only to be told we needed to wait? Where was it when I was feeling unwanted and undesirable, and like a complete failure as a husband? I told her she was being ridiculous, trying to act interested in me now, try to act like she cared about our marriage now, after years of showing me through her actions that she didn't. I said she'd lost the right to be jealous when she spent those years pushing me away. That's not how it works. You can't treat someone like they don't matter, and then get upset when they start to believe you and act accordingly. Lauren kept insisting she was serious, that her feelings were genuine, that she really did love me and want me, and that she didn't want to lose me. She was begging me to believe her, to understand that she was hurt and scared, to see that she was being sincere. But I looked at her standing there with my phone in her hand, and all I felt was anger and resentment. I told her I didn't believe her, that I couldn't believe her, because nothing about her sudden concern made sense given our history. I said the only reason she cared now was that she'd seen that another woman was interested in me, and that wasn't real love or real desire. That was jealousy and possessiveness and fear of losing control. I pointed out that if she hadn't gone through my phone and seen those messages with my gym friend, nothing would have changed. We'd still be living like roommates. She'd still be perfectly content with our dead marriage. But the moment she perceived a threat, the moment she thought another woman might take me away from her, suddenly she cared. That's not love. That's not genuine desire or affection. That's just not wanting to lose something you think belongs to you, even if you don't actually value it or treat it well. It's like having a toy you never play with sitting in your closet, but the moment someone else shows interest in that toy, suddenly you want it, and you're upset at the thought of losing it. That's what this felt like to me. I told Lauren flat out that it was too late. She couldn't suddenly decide she wanted me now just because another woman did. She couldn't expect me to be grateful or excited that she was finally showing interest after years of rejection. She couldn't think that a few tears and claims of love would undo years of damage, hurt, and resentment. I told her I wasn't interested in her jealousy-driven attention, that I didn't want affection that only came because she was afraid of losing me to someone else. I wanted someone who actually wanted me consistently, who desired me because of who I was, not because someone else validated my worth. And that person clearly wasn't her and never had been. But Lauren didn't give up after that initial confrontation, and honestly, part of me had expected her to. She doubled down. She started making efforts to win me back, to prove to me that she was serious about wanting me and about fixing our marriage. The first thing I noticed was that suddenly, after 7 years of rejecting me, Lauren was initiating intimacy. And I don't mean she was just being more receptive or open to my advances. I mean she was actively initiating, which was something she hadn't done in our entire marriage, not even in the early years when things were supposedly good. She'd try to kiss me when I came home from work. She'd touch me when we were in the same room, putting her hand on my arm or my back, running her fingers over my shoulders, finding excuses for physical contact. She'd suggest we go to bed together, saying things like, "Let's go to bed early tonight," with a meaningful look that made it clear she wasn't talking about sleep. It was jarring and uncomfortable because it was such a complete 180 from how she'd been acting for years. She also started dressing differently. And this was particularly obvious because Lauren had spent the past several years basically living in comfortable, practical clothes. Sweatpants and t-shirts around the house, basic work clothes when she went to the office. Nothing that suggested she was trying to be attractive or appealing. But suddenly she was wearing clothes that I knew I used to find beautiful. Dresses that showed her figure, shirts that were a little lower cut, jeans that fit well instead of the baggy, comfortable ones she usually wore. She started putting on makeup even when we were just staying home, doing her hair instead of just pulling it back in a ponytail, and wearing perfume. It was like she was getting ready for a date, except we were just sitting in our own house. The effort was obvious and deliberate, and it made me uncomfortable because it felt performative, as if she were playing a role rather than being genuine. The changes extended to other areas as well. Lauren started cooking my favorite meals, things she knew I liked but hadn't made in years. She'd have dinner ready when I got home from work or the gym, the table set, candles lit, as if she were trying to create some kind of romantic atmosphere. She'd suggest we eat together and actually talk, asking about my day, trying to have conversations like we were a normal couple instead of two people who barely spoke. She'd suggest we watch movies together on the couch like we used to in the early days of our relationship. And she'd cuddle up next to me, put her head on my shoulder, and hold my hand. All of this physical affection and attention, which had been completely absent from our marriage for years, was suddenly being offered freely, and it felt wrong. It felt forced and fake and like she was following some kind of script for how to be a loving wife rather than actually feeling those things. She was constantly telling me she loved me multiple times a day. It felt excessive and desperate. It was like she thought if she said it enough times, I'd start to believe it, or the words would somehow fix what was broken between us. She kept saying she wanted to make our marriage work, that she was committed to fixing things, that she knew she'd messed up and wanted to do better. She apologized repeatedly for how she'd been, saying she was sorry for rejecting me, sorry for making me feel unwanted, sorry for not being a better wife. The apologies fell hollow because they weren't accompanied by any real acknowledgement of the damage she'd done or any explanation for why she'd acted the way she had for 7 years. Lauren suggested we go to couples therapy, which was something I'd actually brought up years earlier when our intimacy issues first started. She dismissed it, saying we didn't need therapy, that we could work it out ourselves. But now, suddenly, she was all for it. She said she'd find a therapist, make the appointments, do whatever it took to save our marriage. She was willing to go to therapy, willing to work on our issues, willing to put in effort, but only now that she thought she was losing me. Where was this willingness years ago, when it might have actually made a difference? In part of her efforts to win me back, Lauren brought up having children. She said that if I still wanted to be a father, we could start trying. She said she was ready now, that she understood how important it was to me, and that she wanted to give it to me. She talked about how we could start trying immediately, how we could look into fertility treatments if we needed them, since we were both in our 40s now, how we could make it work even though we were older than ideal. She was saying all the things I desperately wanted to hear for 7 years, offering me the one thing I'd wanted more than anything else in our marriage, and it made me furious instead of happy. The thing about all of these efforts was that they felt completely insincere. It felt like Lauren was performing the role of a loving, attentive wife because she was scared of losing me, not because she'd actually had some kind of genuine change of heart. And I couldn't shake the feeling that if another lady hadn't been in the picture, absolutely none of this would be happening. Nothing would have changed because she'd been perfectly content with how things were until she perceived a threat. The more I watched Lauren's behavior over those weeks, the clearer it became to me what was really happening. I realized that Lauren had never actually wanted me the way I wanted her, and probably never had, not even the beginning of our relationship. When I really thought about it, even in those first few years of marriage when things were supposedly good, I'd been the one initiating intimacy most of the time. I'd been the one planning dates and trying to keep romance alive. I'd been the one expressing desire and affection. Lauren had been responsive to my efforts, but she'd rarely initiated on her own. I'd just been too in love and too hopeful about our future to see the pattern clearly. She'd married me because I was stable and reliable and a good provider, someone who would give her a comfortable, secure life. But she'd never been passionate about me. She'd never genuinely desired me physically in the way I desired her. She'd never wanted the same things I wanted, like a close, intimate connection and children. She'd been content to keep me around as long as I stayed in my lane, as long as I didn't ask for too much, as long as I didn't rock the boat or make demands that made her uncomfortable. When I started asking for more intimacy, when I'd brought up having children, I'd stepped outside of what she wanted from a marriage, and that's when the rejection started. The rejection wasn't about her being tired, stressed, or having a low libido. It was about control. It was about keeping me in a place where I was providing for her and giving her the stable life she wanted without her having to give me the things I wanted in return, like physical intimacy and a family. As long as I accepted the scraps of affection she decided to provide me with and didn't push for more, everything was fine from her perspective. But now that I had options and another woman was showing interest, suddenly I was valuable to her again. It meant that Lauren had never been honest with me about what she wanted or didn't want. It meant that I'd wasted years of my life, 7 of them particularly miserable, with someone who didn't actually like the same things I wanted, but wouldn't be honest about it. But as painful as all those realizations were, there was one issue that cut deeper than everything else. One thing I couldn't get past, no matter how much Lauren tried to fix things now. We didn't have children. I was 42, Lauren was 40, and we had no kids. That might not seem like a big deal to some people, but to me, it was everything. Now, we were both in our 40s, well past the ideal age for having children. I'd done enough research over the years to know what that meant. For women, fertility drops significantly after 40. The chances of getting pregnant naturally decrease dramatically. The risks of complications during pregnancy and birth increase substantially. The chances of genetic issues and birth defects go up. Even if we started trying immediately, even if Lauren was completely serious about having children now, we'd still be facing an uphill battle. We might need expensive fertility treatments like IVF, which aren't guaranteed to work and can cost tens of thousands of dollars. We might face multiple miscarriages or failed attempts. We might spend years trying and never succeed. And even if we did manage to have a child, I'd be in my mid-40s by the time the baby was born, in my 60s when my kid was still in high school, possibly in my 70s before they were fully independent adults. The window for me to have the family I'd always wanted, the way I'd always envisioned it, had essentially closed. And I'd spent that window, those prime years from my mid-30s to my early 40s, when having children would have been easiest and safest and most natural, in a marriage with a woman who was never going to give me children but wouldn't be honest about it. And now, after all those years of lies and delays and excuses, she was suddenly saying she was ready to have children. She was offering to start trying immediately, talking about fertility treatments, acting like this was something we could still do together. That realization filled me with rage and resentment. Even if her offer was genuine, I couldn't forgive what she'd done. I couldn't forgive the years of manipulation. And I didn't believe her offer was genuine anyway. I felt she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear to get me to stay, the same way she'd been doing for years. The only difference now was that she was scared of losing me, so she was willing to say anything, promise anything, to keep me around. The resentment I felt poisoned everything to the point where I couldn't accept anything from Lauren without feeling angry. I tried for a few weeks to give her efforts a genuine chance. I wanted to be fair, to give her a real opportunity to prove that this wasn't just a reaction to jealousy, but a genuine desire to fix what was broken between us. But my heart wasn't in it. When we were intimate, I felt nothing. There was no connection, no passion, no sense of closeness or love. I felt dead inside when it came to Lauren. That's the best way I can describe it. The love I'd once felt for her, the attraction, the hope for our future together. All of that had been killed over the course of those years of rejection and disappointment and broken promises. What remained was just resentment and anger. I mourned the marriage I'd thought I was going to have, the partnership I'd imagined, the family we'd never build, the life together that had turned out to be a lie. But I didn't specifically mourn the loss of Lauren. I realized, during those weeks of trying to give her efforts a chance, that some damage can't be repaired. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed, no matter how much effort you put into trying to repair them. You can't build a healthy relationship on a foundation of resentment and broken trust, and fundamental incompatibility. The marriage was over, even if we were still technically married. It had been over for a long time, probably years before I'd fully admitted it to myself. Lauren's efforts to fix things now wouldn't change that. They were just making it more evident that we needed to end this officially and move on with our separate lives. I decided to divorce Lauren. I thought about it for weeks, weighing the pros and cons, considering whether there was any path forward that didn't involve ending our marriage. But every path I could see that involved staying with Lauren led to more resentment, more unhappiness, more years wasted in a relationship that would never be what I needed it to be. I consulted a divorce lawyer to understand what the process would entail. We'd been married for 10 years, so it wasn't going to be simple, but it also wasn't as complicated as it could have been. We didn't have children, which meant no custody battles or child support negotiations. We owned a house together, had joint bank accounts, had assets that would need to be divided, but nothing insurmountable. The lawyer explained that in our state, we'd likely be looking at a relatively straightforward division of assets, selling the house and splitting the proceeds, dividing our savings and retirement accounts. I'd owe spousal support for a period of time, since I was making significantly more than Lauren after my recent promotions, but it wouldn't be permanent, since we'd both been working throughout the marriage. The lawyer drew up the divorce papers, and I carefully reviewed them, making sure everything was in order. This was really happening. I was ending my 10-year marriage. I was finally taking control of my life and making a decision that was right for me instead of just accepting whatever scraps of affection and attention Lauren decided to give me. I had the divorce papers served to Lauren at home on a Saturday morning. I wasn't there when it happened because I couldn't face that conversation in person. I'd moved some of my essential belongings to a friend's place where I was staying temporarily, and I'd arranged for the process server to deliver the papers while I was out. When I came back to the house later that day to get more of my things, Lauren was there, and she'd clearly been crying. The divorce papers were on the kitchen table, and she looked at me with this expression of complete shock and devastation. She asked me if I was serious, if I really wanted to end our marriage. I told her I was absolutely serious, that I'd thought it through carefully, and that this was what I needed to do. She started crying more, saying she couldn't believe I was giving up on us, that she'd been making efforts to fix things, that she loved me and wanted to make our marriage work. She begged me to reconsider, to give her more time to prove that she changed, to go to couples therapy before making such a drastic decision. But I was done. I told her that her efforts were too little, too late, that she'd had years to care about our marriage and she'd chosen not to, and I wasn't interested in giving her more chances now that she was scared of losing me. Over the following weeks, Lauren tried everything she could think of to get me to change my mind about the divorce. She called and texted constantly, leaving long voicemails about how sorry she was, how much she loved me, how she knew she'd messed up but wanted to fix it. She showed up at my friend's place, where I was staying, begging to talk to me, and crying on the doorstep until I agreed to a conversation just to get her to leave. She reached out to my parents, trying to get them to convince me to reconsider, telling them that she wanted to save our marriage and didn't understand why I was being so stubborn. She suggested couples therapy again, individual therapy for both of us, a trial separation instead of divorce, anything that would keep the door open instead of closing it permanently. She even brought up having children again, saying we could start trying immediately, that she'd be willing to do fertility treatments if needed. But none of it moved me. Every desperate attempt she made just reinforced that I was making the right decision. If she'd cared this much about our marriage years ago, if she'd put in even a fraction of this effort when I was begging for intimacy and asking to have children, we wouldn't be in this situation. But she hadn't cared then. She only cared now because she was losing me, and that wasn't a good enough reason for me to stay. The divorce process moved forward. We went through mediation to divide our assets. We sold the house and split the proceeds. We divided our savings and retirement accounts as outlined by the lawyer. I agreed to pay spousal support for 3 years, which seemed fair given the length of our marriage and the income disparity. We signed all the papers, went through all the legal processes, and within a few months, our 10-year marriage was officially over. I was a divorced man at 42, single for the first time in over a decade, starting my life over in ways I never expected I'd have to. It was scary, sad, and liberating all at once. I grieved the loss of the future I'd imagined, the family I'd wanted, the years I'd invested in a relationship that ultimately failed. But I also felt free, like I'd been released from a prison I'd been living in for years. I could build a new life on my own terms, find someone who actually wanted the same things I wanted, maybe still have the family I'd always dreamed of, even if it looked different than I'd originally planned. After the divorce was finalized, I focused on building the life I actually wanted, rather than the one I'd been settling for. I continued working out and maintaining the physical transformation I'd achieved. I continued advancing in my career, taking on new challenges and opportunities. I dated casually, meeting women through friends, through dating apps, through social activities. I was open about what I wanted, a genuine connection with someone who desired me, and eventually a family. I wasn't in a rush to jump into another serious relationship because I wanted to make sure I chose the right person this time, someone whose actions matched their words, someone who wanted the same future I wanted. I did eventually explore a relationship with the woman from the gym. We'd maintained our friendship throughout my divorce, and once I was officially single, we started dating. She was younger, 33 to my 42, and she'd been honest from the beginning that she wanted children someday. That relationship didn't work out long-term for other reasons, but it showed me that there were women out there who actually desired me, who were honest about what they wanted, who didn't play games, manipulate, or string me along with false promises. Looking back on my marriage to Lauren, I can see clearly now what I couldn't see when I was in the middle of it. We were fundamentally incompatible in ways that mattered deeply. I wanted intimacy, passion, physical connection, and she didn't, or at least not with me. I wanted children, wanted to be a father, wanted to raise a family, and she didn't, but she lied about it for years rather than being honest, and letting me make an informed decision about whether to stay. The marriage was built on a foundation of unmet needs and dishonesty, and it was never going to survive long-term. Lauren's sudden interest in me after 7 years of rejection wasn't a sign that things could be fixed. It was just proof that she only valued me when she thought she might lose me, which isn't love. Real love doesn't wait for someone else to show interest before suddenly caring. Real love doesn't reject someone for years and then expect them to be grateful when you finally decide to show affection. Real love doesn't lie about wanting children and wasting someone's prime years. I don't hate Lauren, but I don't regret divorcing her either. She showed me who she was through her actions over the course of 7 years, and I finally chose to believe her and act accordingly. Suppose you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, living in a dead bedroom, being rejected constantly by your partner, being strung along about having children or other primary life goals. In that case, I want you to hear this. You deserve better. You deserve to be with someone who actually wants you, who desires you, who is honest with you, and who shares your vision for the future. Don't waste years of your life hoping someone will change when they've shown you over and over through their actions that they won't. Don't let fear of starting over keep you trapped in a situation that makes you miserable. Don't let someone's sudden interest after years of neglect convince you that things will be different, because if they only care when they think they're losing you, that's not real love. Choose yourself. Choose your happiness. Choose your future. It's scary, and it's hard, and it might mean starting over in ways you never expected, but it's worth it. I promise you it's worth it. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there make the decision they need to make for their own well-being and happiness.